All right, back at it here on the 2D podcast as we inch ever closer to the NFL season. Of course, we're always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, nationally recognized as the best in the business when it comes to fixing your parking lot. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Jeff Chadiha of the NFL Network. Eric Eager from Sumer Sports. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. A lot to cover. Brett Veach says they're not trading Chris Jones. The Chiefs say they're going to get it done one way or another. He's not in right now. What's next for the Chiefs? We'll get an AFC North preview with ESPN's Brooke Pryor. She handles the Steelers for ESPN's NFL Nation. The Commanders players are concerned, and I'm using the air quotes if you're catching us via the podcast, concerned with Eric Bieniemy's intensity. Ron Rivera commented on that. So did Eric Bieniemy. We'll hear their comments. Jonathan Taylor leaves Colts camp. Kareem Hunt still can't find a team. If there's time, we might get into the top 10 of the top 100 in the NFL. It's all coming up next here on the Two Deep NFL Podcast.
You're listening to the Two Deep Podcast, the most complete analysis of the National Football League, breaking down the NFL like no one else can. Two Deep is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro was the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Two Deep is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Two Deep Football Podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
Yes, we're back at it as we have got one preseason game down here in the NFL season. We got the first big week of NFL football, of NFL preseason football coming up. And, of course, one of the biggest stars in the game, defensive tackle Chris Jones from the Kansas City Chiefs, remains out. Jeff, let's start with you. Brett Veach says they're not trading him. Where does this leave this negotiation now?
Well, it leaves it in the same place it was, whatever it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever you want to date you want to pick. I mean, right now the Chiefs are trying to figure out how to make this work financially, and Chris Jones clearly is playing for the best number he can possibly get. And I feel like a lot of what the Chiefs have been saying over the last few days, at least in the press, has been about trying to make sure this doesn't get ugly, that they want Chris Jones to know we love you, even though you're not here. We want you to be here. You're the best thing ever. But yeah, to the question you asked me, they don't really have a lot of options in terms of trading him. I mean, there's not really a lot you can do at this stage as far as getting value back for him. If you wanted to talk about trading him, the time to do it was back in February and March. And so Chris Jones knows that. His team of agents knows that. And right now he's in a very good position with Charles Omenihu. The Chiefs signed him. He's not going to be around for the first 6 games of the season. The depth of defensive tackle is not there. And I feel like Chris Jones is going to play this as far as he can take it.
I disagree with you. You can't get value. I think most general managers think that because they're all worried about their jobs, right? Like they don't think future draft picks count as much. They don't grade them they don't value them as much. And on the trade side, and I think that's asinine. I think for the big picture for the franchise, first-round pick's a first-round pick. When you don't know where it's going to be, obviously a 10th pick is more than a 20th pick, but it's still a first-round pick. And so I disagree with that fundamentally, although
it doesn't help you right now, though. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't help
that,
you
for sure. And I also think, by the way, all general managers agree with the premise of your statement, Eric. I think they're like, hey, I get graded on today. I'm not worried about future picks.
Well, so Jeff's right though in that if they are dead set on trading Jones, there are only, if you look at over the cap, there are only, I believe, 3 teams that have the cap space to take on the $19 million that Jones is owed after they don't owe him the prorated stuff. And I believe the Bears, even after signing Ngakoue, are not necessarily I think that they'd have to do some work to get there. Like the Bears are the clear choice because they have 2 1s. And, in theory, you could sort of talk through that. Poles obviously worked for Beach for a long time. They're a team that they had 20 sacks all of last year. So they could really use Chris Jones. But to Jeff's point, which is 100% correct, like the more teams that have cap space, the better you're going to get as far as a trade, because teams can bid against. You can bid one team against another. Like right now, they can't really bid any teams against each other other than maybe the 3 with the top cap space. So that's my only concern. I think Jeff's right as well about the whole how they're positioning themselves. They're basically talking about this, as if they've offered Jones a pretty solid contract, which from what I can tell is true. And if that's the case, then what has changed is actually nothing since March, because much like the Orlando Brown situation, if they offer him a really solid deal and the agent says go fly a kite, then they're not going to go they've been shown not to offer more, like with Orlando Brown and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how this ends up turning out.
Let's just go ahead and make it a perfect 2 for 2. I disagree with you too, Eric. I mean, no one's trading for Chris Jones on this contract. So $19 million is not what you've got to have in cap room. I think the number will be under $10 million because anyone who trades for him is not going to do it.
Petro,
Let me finish my point. Anyone who trades for him is not going to do it on this contract, right? You're going to have to renegotiate a new deal. No one's going to be like, oh, here's a couple of second-round picks. I'll see what I can do. They're going to get permission to negotiate with him. The deal will be redone. This year will be brought down. They'll roll the money in, and it'll be less than a $10 million hit this year. So you don't have to find a team with $20 million.
There are rules in the NFL CBA that prevent that, though.
I don't think so.
You
would know better than me.
I agree with you that there will be a new deal done, but you have to have the cap space open to trade for him in the first place.
They would sign the deal, bring the number down, and trade it, but the negotiations would go on.
But all the prorated money, Petro, I don't want to get into the nuances here, but if the Chiefs were to sign that deal, then the prorated bonus money stays with the Chiefs after they trade him.
That's true.
And if they sign a bullcrap deal, there's one of the reasons, for example, why the Vikings put $40 million APY into Kirk Cousins' void years is because you're not allowed to sign a contract that's a raise over another contract with that same team. Or I'm trying to remember exactly what it is, but you're not allowed. There are things that are in the CBA that avoid what you're exactly talking about. You can't sign a deal and then sign a deal that's more a week later. That's against the CBA.
Okay. Well, but so then you could trade. So then you need to create $20 million, trade him, and then you can.
Yeah. So a team like the Eagles can't. If you look at their books, they literally can't. Right. They have nothing on the bone to do that.
My point is, there's always a way to get one guy in, right? It may be painful in the long run, but there's always a way. I do believe that there would still be a trade market. I don't believe that it's going to happen. Let me be clear about that. But I do think that there would be a trade market. I want to ask you this. Is there leverage, though, at all, Jeff, because for Chris Jones? Because I don't see where it is, right? Because Chiefs have him, right? There's franchise tags available in the future. Chris Jones, if they don't want him to go anywhere, isn't going anywhere. So what's the leverage other than Amenahu being out, other than, geez, we need you to win, which that's always there. Every good player has that. But is there any extra leverage, or is there actually – the Chiefs played it the same way with Orlando Brown. They put the franchise tag on him. He didn't like it. He came back. He turned down the money, asked for Trent Williams' money, got thrown out on the street, and got less than he was being offered from the Chiefs by the Bengals. Why wouldn't this play out the same way next year with Chris Jones?
I'd be shocked if they franchise Chris Jones. I would be. They've shown zero interest in investing in players. He'd be 30 years old. They've shown zero interest in investing that kind of guaranteed money in players of that age. And you're talking about his defensive tackle market, the top 5 salaries right now, I'm just guessing would be about $26 million number. That would be a huge hit for them to carry in the next year's budget. I mean, they're trying to find flexibility. The whole conversation about Chris Jones's deal isn't just about, we want Chris Jones to be here forever. We want Chris Jones to be able to retire Chiefs. They want the flexibility. They want to be able to have him and have the flexibility. And if you're giving him the franchise tag and he says, I'll play for that at $25, $26 million a year, there's not much flexibility in that. So that's not really, I get that they have the control, but I'd be shocked if they utilized it.
Yeah. Last thing here, and then we want to talk about our AFC North preview. Why not just treat Chris Jones, as Jeff just said, he's 29, he'd be 30 years old. Why not treat him as a running back? Slap the franchise tag on him year by year. You're getting him at a price that, it would be 25, 26. That's what you want to be giving him anyway. Other than the obvious, you can't backload the contract and bring the number down. But why not just treat him like a running back and say, take it or leave it this year?
I think the tag next year is $32 million, which, if you plan ahead for it, it's fine. But that's a lot of money. And I think but I agree with you. I think the issue with Chris Jones is we've seen Chris Jones not on a contract here. Last year, he played 225 snaps more than he's ever played before. If you look at things like wins above replacement and stuff like that, he was twice as valuable last year than he was in 2021. We all, the interesting thing about this entire discussion is Chris Jones probably played his best season already. And the Chiefs fans are acting like this team can't survive without him, but their defense, newsflash, was horrendous at the beginning of 2021. And he was there the whole time. And I know that he was playing out of position and stuff, but the thing that's not being discussed by Chiefs fans is what happens if Chris Jones is merely very good again, not the best defensive player in all of football. And that's, I think, where the puke point is for the Chiefs. They've offered him a lot from what everybody has said in the media. And, I can confirm, they've offered him a lot. But the question is are they going to offer him like he's Aaron Donald? Because the difference between Aaron Donald and Chris Jones is Chris Jones can do it for 1 year. And Aaron Donald's been proven to do it for multiple years. And that's just something to chew on, I think.
All right, let's get to our AFC North preview. I had a chance to, introduce Brooke Pryor when I was doing ESPN. I called her a multimedia platform sensation, as she is certainly one that can handle all the platforms. You see her all over ESPN, writing, talking, and of course she covers the Pittsburgh Steelers. I assume, Brooke, we're looking at beautiful Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Is that the background?
You sure are. Let me tell you, it's an oasis here. Beautiful rolling hills. I wouldn't quite call it tropical. It reminds me a lot of St. Joe, Missouri. I'm not going to lie. Very similar vibes, small town, college town, except here there are monks that walk around fully in their robes. And let me tell you, nothing is more jarring than seeing a monk with his iPhone videotaping practice from up on a hill, because I was misinformed. I thought that monks took a vow of silence and were away from society.
Right.
There are multiple kinds, and these kinds love football, and they love Steelers football. So it's been an experience.
Are they
now you know why the Steelers haven't had a losing season in 2 decades, because you got God on their side for sure.
They're blessed.
Do they all have a Rolling Rock in their hand? Isn't that the Rolling Rock Brewery there?
Yes. I have yet to see that. I did see one at Starbucks the other day. So they do drink beverages. I just don't know about alcoholic beverages.
All right, let's start with the Steelers. Are all the prayers for Kenny Pickett taking a big step forward and making everybody forget Ben Roethlisberger? Is that what this camp's all about?
Well, I don't know that they're going to forget Ben Roethlisberger, but I will say that Kenny Pickett has thrown maybe 2 interceptions, maybe 3, all of camp, and one of those came in a 7-on-7. So how much do you want to count that, versus a true 11-on-11 period? But I've been impressed with what I've seen from him so far. Today, the offense won 7 shots. That's Mike Tomlin's favorite drill. It's the first thing they do after individuals. They take 7 reps from the 2-yard line, simulating a 2-point conversion. And the first team offense goes 4 reps. Second team goes 3rd. Kenny Pickett scored on 3 of 4. The offense won 6-1. And then they ended this practice with goal line, and the offense dominated that as well. Kenny Pickett just looks like he's processing a lot faster. And I feel like that's what they need to take the step forward as an offense. And I've been especially impressed with the way that he's built a rapport with George Pickens, Allen Robinson, Deontay Johnson. That seems to be happening much faster than it did a year ago.
You know, Brooke, I go back to something Heinz Ward told me a long time ago about the Steelers that I think always applies to Steelers. And it's like he said, when they run the ball and they play good defense, that's who they are. Throwing the ball is great, but being a physical team is who they are. And that team wasn't very physical. It's hadn't been physical in a long time. Are they going to be a more physical team this season?
Well, I don't think that you go out and get Isaac Seumalo if you weren't expecting to be a physical team. I mean, they did a lot of work on that offensive line. They also traded up to get Broderick Jones. And while Dan Moore has looked to have been holding off Broderick Jones so far through camp, I mean, today was another padded practice. And in all the team periods, Dan Moore took first team reps. I think at some point Broderick Jones gets in there. It could be by week 1. Right now, I was thinking that's where this was headed. Maybe it's not until later in the season, but I think that they've made a lot of moves to really beef up both lines. Armon Watts has impressed me. They got Breeden Fiocco. I think that this is a team that, you're right, the trenches are so huge. And not to mention, I mean, they've got TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. They also added Marcus Golden to give them a true quality third outside linebacker. And by the way, Najee Harris is still on this team, as is Jaylen Warren. And we haven't seen much of Najee Harris through training camp. I think they're being cautious with him because it was this time a year ago that he got stepped on by an offensive lineman. And that really set him back and set the offense back. He wasn't healthy for a long time. And, you know, to that commenter's point, it is can be a very boring offense. I'm not going to lie. There are times when you're like, oh my God, please don't run the ball again. But I think that by getting Kenny Pickett more involved, more settled at this point in the year, because last year he didn't take over until week 4, but I think having him entrenched as the starter now gets you the opportunity to take more shots, to give him more freedom in this offense, to hopefully be a more balanced offense than we saw a year ago.
Brooke, you talk about the offensive defensive line. Like, I think one thing that would concern me if I'm looking at the Steelers is the secondary, right? When you look at, you know, Patrick Peterson had a wonderful year last year for Minnesota, but he's obviously on the other side of 30. Chandon Sullivan had kind of the opposite of a great year for the Vikings in that nickel spot. And then they have Joey Porter starting, or presumably one of, you know, as their third corner there. Keanu Neal, DeMonte Casey, a couple guys next to Minkah Fitzpatrick. Like, how, when you think of the Steelers defense, you know, the past, we always think about, you know, the upfront guys, you know, the Porters and the Harrisons and those guys, but the secondaries were always solid enough to complement that. How have they looked in camp, and where do you project the secondary looking, you know, sort of in an AFC where it's all good quarterbacks?
Yeah, I think that one guy that has had a good steady camp is Levi Wallace. And I think that he's the corner that's been most overlooked in that room because of the addition of Patrick Peterson and Joey Porter Jr. It's just kind of been like, oh yeah, and also Levi Wallace is there. But I think that they're really going to lean on him, especially after you lose, I believe, 7th round pick Corey Trice, who, yes, late round pick, I understand that. But he and Joey Porter Jr., I think, had the potential to be two complementary pieces. They're both built like avatar corners. They just are these tall, lanky guys, and they were really good at using their size. You still have Joey Porter Jr. I don't think that he's going to start week 1, but the way that he's developed in camp, I've been really impressed, especially with his poise, because this is a guy that's going up against George Pickens day in and day out, and he does not get frustrated when George Pickens makes these crazy circus catches, and he's doing everything right. The technique is there, his, you know, body placement, speed, everything, and there's nothing you can do. And I've talked with people in the Steelers organization about that, and they're like, that's what we wanted. That's what we saw in him, because he grew up around the game. He knows how to be calm and collected, and being beaten on that one rep, that's not going to get him down. He bounces right back. So I think that the interesting thing is going to be the versatility that they have. Like, I would not be surprised to see Patrick Peterson play some safety. We've seen looks in that during camp because he's been open about the fact, hey, I can't run. I can't keep up with the younger guys anymore. So put him back at free safety. That frees you up to do things with Minkah, move him up, let him freelance a little bit. But I think the other thing is the safety position is not as healthy as you want it to be. I mean, KZ's been out for a lot of camp. Minkah was absent with a family matter. It's been a lot of Kenny can't think of his last name, and that should tell you how out of nowhere this guy came from. Local guy, his number is 41. There's so many Kennys. Robinson, thank you.
Yeah, the XFL, the first round of the XFL legend.
Yeah,
right
and
there.
he's a local guy. He's from Pittsburgh. He's been really impressive in camp as a guy that kind of came out of nowhere. Big trash talker. So today, with KZ still out, Minka saw his first team reps, and then he was in there with Kenny. And I think that looked to be going, but he's still, rough around the edges. So I think the biggest thing is they just haven't had guys all healthy at the same time to practice, to develop the rapport and the chemistry that you really need to have an effective secondary.
A couple from the chat room here. One, Tommy wants to know, is George Pickens going to vault up the All-Pro type status?
Fantasy question.
Yeah. That's what everyone's looking at there. That you sounded pretty big on him, and then also Darnell Washington, the big tight end from Georgia. There's a lot of hype around him as well. How are those two looking for the fantasy geeks out there?
I would feel good about drafting George Pickens. I don't know that Darnell Washington is enough of a consistent threat at this point, but I can tell you that seeing the Steelers work through their goal line plays, and especially in 7 shots, he's a big target and he has been involved. Mitch Trubisky had a beautiful pass to him. He had a toe tap catch in 7 shots today. And I mean, listen, Mike Tomlin said it best, you're not going to tackle that guy. If he gets anywhere near the goal line, good luck bringing him down. He's going to fall into the end zone and score. So I think that hype is very real, very legitimate. I mean, it's a crowded depth chart in front of him with Pat Freiermuth and Zach Gentry, but I think that he's going to carve out a role for himself as long as he can be a consistent catcher and a more consistent route runner. George Pickens, my favorite thing that he's told me recently was, I asked him, I said, do you believe in aliens? And he said, no, but I think I am an alien. And I was like, that doesn't make a ton of sense, but you're not wrong. I mean, there's no other explanation for these gravity defying catches that he makes, but he's just got to keep his cool on the field. I mean, there was a play on Sunday where he caught the ball. It was a 1-on-1. He caught it, beat his man, and then ran all the way to the end zone, and then just kicked the pylon over in the corner of the end zone for no reason. He didn't go back and picked it up. He just kicked it over. And it's little things like that, I mean, reps are seeing it. He's been called twice now in 7 shots for running out the back of the end zone, whether forced or unforced, and not reestablishing himself before he made a catch. And then he's argued with the officials afterwards. So I think the only thing that's going to get in the way of George Pickens is himself.
Wow. All right.
That's big time Brandon Marshall vibes. And as well as a throwback to Sammy Watkins, by the way. Yeah. Talking about extraterrestrial football players.
Yeah, there we go. The solar lizard that's there. No doubt. All right, Jeff, where do you want to start? Let's talk about the rest of the AFC North. Who you want to go with next?
We'll start with the Bengals, and obviously Joe Burrow being out with that calf strain. A lot of questions about him. If he's healthy, if this isn't as big a deal, is this the best team in the AFC North?
I think so, but I don't see that lightly, because I think that this is the best division in football. I think it's the most well-balanced division. And to me, there's not there. I think the Bengals are the obvious best team, but there's not an obvious worst team. And I think the separation between all of them, I think it's the Bengals and the Ravens on the top. And then the next tier right down are the Steelers and Browns. But I mean, crazy things happen in football, right? We all know that. But I think that the Bengals, they've made a conscious effort to give Joe Burrow a better line, adding Orlando Brown, as you guys well know. I'm interested to see how that goes. I know that Orlando wants to be a left tackle. He wants to be paid like a left tackle. He's slotted as a left tackle, all of that. I still think he's a better right tackle. I'm curious to see how this goes in Cincinnati. But, I mean, look at their weapons that they have around them. I mean, Jamar Chase, and not to mention, they still have trying to pull up my depth chart here because I have all these names floating around in my head, but T. Higgins and Joe Mixon. Yeah. I think that they kept the core of their offense there, even without Samaje Perine. I still think they're going to be good. And defensively, there's not much weakness. I'm concerned a little bit about them losing their 2 safeties, Jesse Bates and his teammate. And That's Von Bell. Thank you. But I still think that, yes, this is the best team. But, yes, it's just a calf strain. But last year when Joe Burrow missed time in the preseason because he had his appendix out, this was a team that was slow to get going. The Steelers beat this team early on. So I think that's going to be a bigger factor than, downplaying me like, oh, he'll be back. Don't worry, he'll be back. Okay, yeah, he might be back for week 1, but that's valuable time that he's missing in the preseason.
Yeah, for sure. Cooper rushed as Dallas Cowboys beat that team in week 2 after the Steelers beat them in week 1. So it's kind of a slow start. I think that was a good point made by you. When you look at Baltimore, the Ravens, when Lamar Jackson was really at his best as far as the team success, they were spending like 2/3 of their dollars on the defense, right? And now, he's making a significant amount of that. Now Odell's making a significant amount of that. Ronnie Stanley, who hasn't really gotten on the field, he's making a lot of money. And they bring in Todd Monken, which I think can really help. But when I look at this Ravens team, I look at the defense, and I'm thinking to myself, this team already struggles to keep up with the Bengals. Even the Steelers gave them problems in the passing game last year, and the Browns, obviously, with Deshaun Watson, probably be improved in the passing game this year. When you look at the Ravens, are you seeing the same thing I am as far as their leak with their defense, or is it more of a concern on the offensive side of the ball?
I'm concerned about the offense only because I haven't seen it yet. And that, to me, is the biggest wild card in the AFC is what can Todd Monken bring out of Lamar Jackson and all of these weapons that they've acquired. They also add a guy like Zay Jones, and will Rashad Bateman be healthy? J.K. Dobbins still isn't back. Everything they're saying is what you should be saying after you pay a quarterback all that money. We're giving him the keys to the offense. Why he didn't have the keys before, I don't know. I probably would have given them to him day one. The man won an MVP. What are we doing? So I'm glad they've corrected that they've given him the keys. Not to mention, they've still got Mark Andrews. But how does this look? I know today they put the wristbands back on the quarterbacks. That was something that Todd Monken took away early on because he thought it would help them with the terminology. But I've seen how rocky it can get when a new offensive coordinator comes in and tries to tweak and change what a quarterback is doing. I mean, that happened here in Pittsburgh when Matt Canada came in and was like, all right, Ben, here's what you're going to do. It's my time now. I think it's going to be a little bit different here because Lamar should want to be doing what Todd Monken is doing, but I need to see it in a game. And by the way, the other day, the defense had 9 interceptions in one practice. It's one of those things where training camp's like, yeah, that's great. The defense had 9 interceptions. Excuse me, the offense threw 9 interceptions. It's not great, but I think that this defense is, I have less concerns about the defense than I do about the offense.
Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns. Is this all just about Deshaun Watson, whether or not he knocked off the rust and now having a full off season brings it back? A lot of guaranteed money. God knows he's caused a lot of problems in negotiations for other teams with their quarterbacks. Can he cause any problems for anybody else's defenses this year for the Browns?
The Browns better hope so. Again, this is a quarterback that you have spent so much money on. And what did you get for it last year? Didn't they go 3-3 when he was in? And he looked like a shell of the quarterback that was last on the field with the Texans. They've put all their chips in. They pushed them all in with Deshaun Watson. Every egg is in Deshaun Watson's basket. And to their credit, they brought in Elijah Moore in the offseason. There have been nothing but good reports out of the chemistry that he's showing with Deshaun Watson. He's looking like an elite receiver in Cleveland, and you better hope so. And you better hope that Deshaun Watson can maximize that. He's talked a big game about feeling like a leader, feeling more confident. He did the bow and arrow celebration in a practice during mini camp. That's something he hadn't done in Cleveland to that point. But I need to see it on the field, and I need to see it on a Sunday because it kind of felt like he was going to make that his version of a triumphant return last year. That didn't happen. And the Browns defensively, they bring in Jim Schwartz. They bring in Zadarius Smith to be a complement to Myles Garrett. I need to see Zadarius Smith stay healthy. And I need to see Jim Schwartz's defense in action because last year the Browns defense was not good. And when you have a bad defense and an ineffective quarterback, you don't have a good football team. But if all of those things come together, that's the thing about the AFC North. I think that every single team has the pieces to be incredibly competitive, but will they all fall into place? And of course, we know injuries will happen. Crazy things will happen. They already have happened. But I do think that right now, Bengals are the best team in this division. And then it's closely followed by the Ravens, obviously question marks. And then I think it's going to be a race between the Steelers and the Browns, but I wouldn't be surprised if 3 teams out of this division make it to the playoffs.
By the way, I do love this. Terry says it's the Browns. And Matt's, I think the Browns will never win until they get a more interesting helmet and logo.
I mean, look good, feel good, play good.
At least the uniform looks like back like it used to. They haven't strayed too far from God this time.
Yeah,
but
they did.
The ones with like the orange numbers and the Cleveland.
Oh yeah.
They didn't deserve to win anything.
Yeah, those were trash. Brooke, you're the absolute best. Brooke Pryor, you can read her work at ESPN.com. She's the ESPN NFL Nation Steelers reporter. You also see her on TV. Hosting shows. She's the multi-talented. She does a fantastic job, and we're lucky to have you, Brooke. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you down the road.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You bet. Brooke Pryor. She's an awesome person, too. I can tell you that as well. Always a lot of fun when she used to cover the Kansas City Chiefs. By the way, we're brought to you by some more great people, Gann Asphalt and Concrete, a nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they're not a problem. They make them disappear. Been doing it since 1994. Why risk accidents and liability in your parking lot? Get your parking lot striped right now. Brightly striped lot will cut down on accidents and keep your parking lot as safe as possible. Cut down on those liability questions for you. Plus, get your seal coating done now before the weather turns cold. Weekends are booking up fast. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Let's talk
down Kansas City.
By the way, I met with the folks who
Petro, you got to put back up the signage here.
I know. Well, I have to take it down. Thank you for reminding me. I have to take it down when we have 4 because it doesn't fit. So
yeah.
Well done. Thanks producing subtly and not using that thing called a private chat. I just blast it right out there, Eric. I find that was best. Right. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with Eric Bieniemy. All right, this is one of the big stories today around the National Football League. His intensity is a problem. We've talked a lot about Eric Bieniemy, about the fact that he is a guy that's really, whether I think an unwilling or maybe an unwanting front man for the situation with black head coaches in the National Football League. And we talked about, I thought this is a great opportunity. Still think it's a great opportunity for him to go and have success with Washington. And then nobody can say he didn't call the plays. He didn't do it. He's getting a chance to do it all. There are bumps early. At first, I want to let you play. And the question's on here as well. So you can hear exactly what was asked of Ron Rivera about Eric Bieniemy and the players' reactions and his thoughts on it.
Going back to Bieniemy and his intensity, have players had to kind of adapt to that and have any, I guess, sort of struggled with that at times?
Yeah, I mean, they have, and one of the biggest things is and I had a number of guys come to me and I say, hey, just go talk to him. I said, understand what he's trying to get across to you, and I think as they go and they talk and they listen to him, it's been enlightening for a lot of these guys. I mean, it's a whole different approach. You get a different kind of player from the players back in the past. Especially in light of how things are coming out of college football. So a lot of these young guys, they do struggle with certain things. And a lot of you also got to take for where they've been. I mean, guys coming from certain programs are used to it. Guys come from other programs aren't as much. So, us as a coach, I kind of have to assimilate and get a feel for everybody. Eric has an approach and it's the way he does things and he's not going to change. And because he believes in it, Jack has his approach. Having been a head coach, I think Jack has a tendency to try and figure guys out a little bit more as opposed to, hey, this is it. This is the way it's going to be, that type of stuff. Where Eric hasn't had that experience yet.
Just when they came to you, it's just they felt like Eric was riding them too hard, or?
Well, they just were a little concerned.
Okay. How do you take that one, Jeff?
Is Eric Bieniemy being Eric Bieniemy? I think that we all know he's an intense guy, so it's not like there's a shock there. And I forget who put it up there about Washington being soft. I think Rivera made a really good point about young players come out of college football today who it's a whole different ball game there, where you're getting NIL money now. You can transfer if you're not happy. Coaches have to really placate you. And that's not who Eric Bieniemy is. I mean, he's always been tough. And I know Eric remembers, the Adrian Peterson fumbling issues in Minnesota early on. And I'm sure Adrian Peterson can tell you all kinds of stories about how intense Eric Bieniemy could have got back then. So, I'm not surprised. I think it's good for Washington. I think Rivera likes it. I'm surprised that he was that vocal about it and he kind of punted on it instead of backing his coach. I do think he could have been more supportive of Bieniemy in that regard. But I think Washington, what they've been offensively for the last, whatever it's been, 5, 6, 7 years, they need a change. They need a shakeup. And so that's what he's there for.
Eric, we're going to hear what Bieniemy had to say today. What's your reaction to hearing Rivera?
Well, Eric Bieniemy famously told Adrian Peterson during the 2009 season, the year where the Vikings went 12-4, and everything was duckies and bunnies. He grabbed Adrian Peterson and said, "Your fumbles are going to be the reason why we don't win the Super Bowl." And I tweeted this today, and I think Eric Bieniemy is a wonderful, I think his tact is wonderful for players like Adrian Peterson and Patrick Mahomes, guys who are ultra competitive pricks that are trying to there's a little bit of Patrick that's trying to prove Eric Bieniemy wrong in every single game, as weird as that sounds. So I think that it was the same thing with people talked about Mike Singletary this way. People talked about how good Larry Bird was at coaching the Pacers in the sort of opposite way, but and Bieniemy was the second round pick in the league. He was a very good college football player, pretty decent NFL player. Some former players struggle relating to players along the spectrum of talent. And I think that's something that's not trivial. And, again, coaching Patrick Mahomes hard for 5 years, won 2 Super Bowls, and that's awesome. I think it's harder when the players aren't as talented.
I am surprised and the fact that he basically said Jack knows how to do that. He's been a head coach. I mean, that was, I don't know if he meant to do that. It almost, I wondered, did Ron Rivera not want Eric Bieniemy? Was this somehow like Dan Snyder's hire back in his dying days as the owner of the Commanders? And this is him being like, hey, that's Eric, man. I ain't got nothing to do with this. That's over there.
Isn't that clear?
Well,
Jeff, I mean, are we I don't think it's particularly clear at all that Bieniemy is Bieniemy to Rivera is probably a threat, right? I'm not trying to, this is very clearly new ownership. They were anticipating it. This is a bridge year. That's why they didn't go after a real quarterback, all this kind of stuff. And I think Bieniemy is this is kind of buying an option on a head coaching candidate. And more than anything, this year's a throwaway year for Washington. And so I don't think Bieniemy was brought in by Rivera to win. I think Bieniemy was brought in by other people to be an option at the coaching position.
Oh, wow. I saw it the other way. I saw it. I have nothing. I've never really investigated this to find out the truth of it, but I always thought Rivera was doing Bieniemy a solid going back to their days in Philadelphia. They're all connected to Andy Reid, and I thought this was a way for Eric Bieniemy to have a chance to be an offensive coordinator and showcase more of his personality. And I took Rivera's comments as more of this is who he is. This is what he needs to showcase. He's getting attention for this. He's getting more publicity in Washington in the first 6 months than he ever got in Kansas City. And so I thought this was more about what you're seeing play out here. And I think I do think what Rivera said is correct, that when you're a head coach, you do have to find ways to motivate people that just aren't always one way. Like Tom Coughlin had that attitude in New York and almost got him run out of there, and he had to change it up. And so you just can't always be the hard-ass guy. And notoriously, coaches who coach running backs, who coach receivers, who coach DBs, generally, by and large, are more laid-back dudes. They're more kind of like part of the crew. That's just the personality of the position. And so you don't see as many guys at that spot who were just in your face, yelling and screaming. And so, and they have that as an OC. Like, I can't really think of too many guys in the NFL who have that job who have that kind of mentality. So I'm sure it is jarring.
Let's hear what Eric.
Yeah, I will say though, I one thing to add to this though is a lot, and that's why I think like the Jack Del Rio quote, which I don't think Ron Rivera is being a jerk. I actually think Ron Rivera is one of the more progressive coaches in the league as far as like who he hires and things like that. But like, it is like a little bit of, it is telling that the Jack Del Rio thing was said when like Jack Del Rio got a head coaching job the first time that he was a candidate. And a lot of these guys get to, they get to kind of like feel out the issues with their personality as head coach, because for whatever reason, Bieniemy's had to go through this vetting process that literally no one else has. And so that is the sinister part of it. I think all the charges against Bieniemy and the reason he's not a head coach, I think in some ways are fair. It's just that the issue is that no one else has to go through these same trials and tribulations that he does just for one of those jobs. I think that's the hard part about this discussion topic.
Let's hear what Eric Bieniemy had to say. He was asked about basically Ron Rivera's comments from the day before.
Have there been instances where players have, I guess, struggled to adapt to your coaching style and have come up to you and had a conversation about it?
And so before it even goes anywhere, I make it the point to address the conversation, because one thing, my job is to be very observant. I got to know the people that I'm discussing and working with. So my job is to address. If there's something that they may have an issue with, please, let's discuss this. Here's the reason why I felt a certain way. Here's why I said it. Now, okay, I put it back on the player. And you got to understand, we're in a grown man's business. We're in a grown man's world. My job is to make sure that I'm doing the best possible job of over-communicating clarity. I take a tremendous amount of pride in that. They also know when I'm getting on them, ain't nothing personal. What's personal is that I want us to win. I expect that particular player to be great at all times. I expect the effort to be a standard that's accepted by all of us. So when you're not reaching that, it's my job to address it. So sometimes they may like the highlights and the praise, but sometimes they may not like it. And I'm perfectly fine with that, because that's my job. Because if I ain't doing my job, my ass get fired. So it's my job and my responsibility to make sure that I'm getting our guys to do what I expect them to do.
I think everybody loves that. If I don't get it done, I'm fired. But, sometimes it's not about what you're saying. It's about how you're saying it. There's a different way to approach coaching running backs and coaching an entire offense, Jeff. Is that what's missing here? He's still using the running back coach techniques on an entire offense?
Probably so. I mean, you have to know exactly what he's saying. And I always say in these situations, you like to hear the entire dialogue that's going on there to know, hey, is this really as bad as it sounds, or are you just somebody who can't take the message that well? And I agree. I never really felt like in Kansas City, where they won a lot when he was there, that aside from the situations that were happening with Mahomes and the LaShawn McCoy tweets, that there were people who were coming out and bashing Eric Bieniemy as being too hard to handle. And so you do have to adjust. You do have to grow, and you have to learn, and you have to understand that it is a different league. And maybe as the head coach, that's something he's going to have to figure out. But again, I don't have a problem with it, because I know a lot of football coaches who operate this way who've had a lot of success. and I think this is a team that offensively isn't in a position where they can complain about the way things are, because they haven't earned the right to complain about it.
The Washington has started in the Ron Rivera era. Washington has started, I think, 1-6, 2-6, and last year was like 1-4. Like, very clearly what they're doing in August sucks. Yeah. So maybe Bieniemy is because that team's good enough. They've gotten to like 500 after 12 games all 3 of those years. So they somehow figure it out. They come out of the gate terrible, and like that's something, maybe Bieniemy looked at that and said, I'm going to change things, and maybe we're going to be on the ball or something, as opposed to messing around for the first month of the year.
If your business has any problems with its parking lot, Gann Asphalt and Concrete can fix them for you. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer. It helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Make sure you tell them you heard about it on the Too Deep podcast. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Jonathan Taylor leaves camp. This shouldn't stun anyone, but what does it mean for the Colts in the near future?
Before I go ahead, I'm drinking Mountain Dew because it goes really well with the Gann. You notice that how much that pops with the Gann. I hope they like that over there.
Okay, good.
In my Jacksonville hotel room.
Yeah,
I think, and I got to be careful how I say this, but this feels very much like a hold-in to me. This feels very much like a player who is taking advantage of every last possibility to start to let ownership with Jim Irsay specifically know that, look, I don't like it here. And maybe it's time for somebody to start seeing or showing teams what happens when running backs aren't available, who are very valuable to their teams. The hard part about trying to do a hold-in or trying to do anything where you are trying to get your money, trying to make a statement, but also feeling the effects of hurting your team is that these guys they love playing with their teammates. They love being in the locker room. And so I'll be curious to see where he's at in week 1 and week 2 and week 3, because this feels very much like he's trying to make a statement in a very passive aggressive way. Because once he got on that bus and, he was on the PUP list and now he's left town to go rehab someplace else, that tells you that behind the scenes, he's not happy being there every day. And that if I'm Shane Steichen, I'm sitting there thinking, we got to get this figured out. Because I can't be sitting here thinking, Gardner Minshew or Anthony Richardson, whoever starts in week 1, is going to have any kind of success without number 28 back there running the football.
Yeah. Eric, by the way, I love what you said, Jeff. Is anybody going to play the role of Kurt Flood and sacrifice their career for the greater good of the running backs that come behind them? And just totally sit it out. I mean, that's kind of what you're talking about. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe we don't deserve the long-term contract, but go ahead and try to play 1 year without us when you're counting on it. Eric, what do you see this playing out as?
Yeah, didn't Chiefs legend Le'Veon Bell already do that?
Yeah.
I think when Le'Veon Bell's tree fell in the forest and nobody noticed, that was a big issue, right? He is, Taylor's amazing. Taylor also had 2,000 carries in college. He's probably trying to get his before it gets rough there. I agree with Jeff though. I think this offense could be very, very good with Richardson handing off to Taylor. I also agree. It's an interesting contrast when you look at Justin Jefferson in Minnesota, who's in a similar spot and probably has a lot more to lose. Maybe not a lot more to lose if you were injured, but that contract is going to be much bigger than Taylor. And he's out there doing it's interesting because the NFL Players Association and the union is so bad at this. There's no uniform way that these guys act. And so I think when a guy like Taylor tries to rightly exercise some of the power he has, it's such a sore thumb relative to other players who seemingly don't. And so it's, the teams don't know how to act relative to, the players who are kind of playing the good soldier, for example, Jefferson. And so it gets weird. It's how in the world did they sign a CBA where you get fined $50,000 for sitting out a day of practice? It's unbelievably.
Yeah.
I mean, Jonathan Taylor, it's every time I see this, it's just I shake my head at the situation that his own union put him in.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Matt says, aren't running backs a dime a dozen? I would think Taylor has no leverage. We're going to find out, I think, over the long run, but a dime a dozen seems to be the case because Kareem Hunt is seen a lot of places. He's a guy that doesn't have that many carries. That's one of the things that I think is kind of interesting about Kareem Hunt. He has not been overused over the last few years. He is the prototype of what teams would want. He also seems to be an insufferable pain in the ass off the field as well, very immature at the very least. But he can run it. He can catch it. Why is Kareem Hunt not landing a spot? Is it that he's maybe an even bigger problem off the field than he's already proven to be publicly to this point?
It's a great question, and maybe there is maybe his asking price is too high. Maybe his expectations are too high. It's crazy to me because I see guys like, to your point, like Leonard Fournette has found other opportunities. He came in the same draft class as him. Who's the guy up in New England? Latavius Murray has been around forever. Some of these guys just hang around. You're like, Melvin Gordon's got a job in Baltimore, and you're telling me that Kareem Hunt, to your point.
Latavius Murray was Denver's best running back last year.
Yeah, he's been on like 5 teams. He keeps finding work. But Kareem Hunt has 900 carries and something like 250 receptions in his career. In the same draft class, Christian McCaffrey that's 1,100 touches. Christian McCaffrey has almost 1,500 touches, and he's considered a god in San Francisco. And so I don't understand if behind the scenes there are things going on or if he's expecting too much or asking too much. But I can't believe that it's taken this long for him to find work, because it seems like lesser talents and older guys who are more used up are getting opportunities. So, yeah, I think he definitely deserves to be a shot somewhere.
And he's getting a look in Indianapolis, Eric. Is this the natural fit? He goes there. Jonathan Taylor goes out. Like we've got it all with musical chairs amongst the running backs.
Well, Taylor's not unusually effective as a receiver, so it gives you a couple outs, right? Like if Taylor comes back, we've seen players who hold out, their injury rates are higher. If Taylor comes back from this, I would only play him first and second down. So in the best case scenario where he comes back, Kareem Hunt could be your third down back, similar to what he was in a lot of cases for Nick Chubb in Cleveland. If he doesn't, then he can take that lead back role, which, he was obviously great in Kansas City doing that, won the rushing title in 2017. But the funny thing is for Cleveland, he hasn't been great when Chubb's been hurt as that lead runner. So it's an interesting one. I think they're just trying to cover all their bases here. They want a competent running back in the event that, that Taylor doesn't come back. And then they probably want a guy to spell Taylor. Like Taylor was injured a lot last year. And, you want it, to take some some blows off of his body.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he lands. It'll be interesting to talk about the NFL Top 10. We'll get to that on a future podcast as we are running short on time. Remember, we're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Anything you need when it comes to parking lots, make sure the first impression you leave with your customer, first and last, actually, as they leave, with your customers, your clients, is a good one. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, been fixing parking lots since 1994. You can give them a call at 816-484-3338. Find them online at gannasphalt.com. And if you're catching us via the podcast, remember, you can be a part of the conversation Tuesday nights, 8 or 9 p.m. Depends upon which podcast we do first, but Too Deep, either at 8 or 9 p.m. Central Time on Tuesdays right now. That might change as we get to the NFL season, but that's where it stands right now. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City, saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Too Deep NFL Podcast.